5 Principles of Regenerative Agriculture. Welcome to this lesson about the key principles of regenerative ag. What we want to look at are the basic principles, or what could also be referred to as patterns, which direct the way regenerative farmers work. This is an important section, which really is at the key of the RegAg movement, as these principles guide the way farmers work with and think about soil. As mentioned in an earlier lesson, the foundation of RegAg is more of an output than input-oriented approach. That is, RegAg farmers look at how things should look, envisioning the desired state they want to achieve. In this lesson, we will be looking about how to use nature as a model for agriculture, as well as the 5 key principles of regenerative agriculture. The guiding picture that lays the groundwork comes from observing thriving ecosystems. The simple question to be asked is, how does nature do it? What we see in nature, or thriving intact ecosystems, is actually the work of millions of years of research and development. Nature has developed over these long periods many different methods and models of life forms, symbiosis, and communities. Some forms are ancient, while others evolved to endure only briefly. Thus, what we can see in natural landscapes are proven patterns which should guide us in the development of systems which resemble, as much as possible, these tried and tested outcomes. Look at the old natural forest, the steppes, or ancient prairies. How did they and do they function, work, and succeed? What are their guiding principles in order to develop and maintain incredibly rich and beautiful ecosystems and landscapes which endure for hundreds and thousands and millions of years? There are 5 main principles which can be synthesized. Although we can of course find many more depending on author, farmer, and orientation. But these 5 principles are referred to by almost all RegAg farmers. The first one is the continuous protection of the soil surface, or keeping the soil covered as often as possible. Nowhere in nature can one find open soils for long periods of time. Natural soils in any part of the world are always protected by vegetation. This is how nature works. It protects and even builds up its resources. Nature has a regenerative force and direction. Imagine a landscape somewhere where the soils and vegetation on top of it have disappeared into the valley, eroded. What happens then? Well, slowly lichen and mosses come back, live and die, and slowly start to develop an environment that is a thin layer of soil where the first annual grasses can live on. These then live and die and continue to build up the soil until perennial vegetation, the first shrubs, and in later stages, trees, that can come to then live. Until after 500 to 5,000 years, the natural vegetation, in many cases around the world, a forest, will have developed at the same spot. This is how nature works. It builds and protects its resources. There is a saying that goes, the meaning of evolution is to develop beauty in the world. So how does nature do it? It builds up and protects its soils by, for example, the leaves in the forests, or by underground vegetation, or by the mosses and grasses that hold the thin soil layer, hampering wind and rain from washing that incredibly important resource away. So how is soil currently being treated? Well, like dirt. Think of how this very term, dirt, symbolizes the manner of how we devalue and demean the very foundation of life on land. Instead, we should cherish and nurture this incredibly rich and miraculous resource and do whatever we can to protect it. Since the evolution of agriculture, humans have been confronted with the discrepancy of having to work the soil in order to suppress weeds and give human-serving cultures an advantage, while at the same time risking to lose the ground. And precisely this is what has happened all over the world in the last millennia. David Montgomery, in his book Dirt, the erosion of civilization, shows quite impressively how most of civilization, from the first Mesopotamian cultures to the Greeks and Romans, to the Maya, Aztecs, and the culture of Eastern Island, all collapsed due to the way they worked their soils. That is, plowing, leaving it open, bare, and unprotected to the brute forces of wind and water. This effect was already prevalent in ancient times, as we can see here on a picture. The loss of that thin layer of life-giving soil. It is important to note that what might at first look like a harmless and slow process is truly the steady loss of, in human time scales, a non-renewable resource. The problematic behind it we have covered in previous lessons, but it is important to briefly review the situation here once again. Be it water or wind, barren soil is doomed to be lost anywhere in the world. So keeping the soil covered as often as possible is key. The second principle is to minimize soil disturbance. Nature doesn't work its soil mechanically. With the exception of wild boars, which plow the soil here and there a little, there's nothing in nature which disturbs the protective vegetation cover of the soil and the soil itself to such a large extent. Clearly, in line with the first principle, minimal soil disturbance is of utmost importance for avoiding soil erosion, soil degradation, and with it the loss of soil fertility as well as the steady decline of soil life. The third principle is to increase plant diversity, or a little more general, the diversity of all life forms. Here we are referring mainly to the crops we intentionally plant and animals that we intentionally raise. In nature, there is no monoculture. Hardly anywhere in the natural world can you find just one plant or animal species dominating large areas. Diversity in nature is key for an intact ecosystem. Healthy ecosystems are incredibly rich and abundant. Besides the beauty and the richness this creates, it actually, for our agricultural perspective, creates systems that are resilient and can cope much better with tough conditions such as too little or too much rain. Research documents that rich systems produce, under difficult circumstances, more biomass than monocrop systems. Here the link again to soil life, because every plant species sends different life-giving cocktails into the ground in the form of exudates. Just like with us humans, we don't want to eat just a single plant. Our microbiology also doesn't want to just eat a single plant. We need different sources of food to stay healthy, and that is true for soil life. With the widespread growth of monocultures, we are not only creating imbalanced and vulnerable systems, but we are also losing more and more diversity of species, both plant and animal. As the main land use on the earth is currently agriculture, we have a strong influence and responsibility as farmers for other life forms which have evolved in and for more natural systems. To look at one study from eastern South Dakota, while insects in natural meadows are generally incredibly rich in species, in this study only 19 species of insects were collected in a cornfield, and even only a meager 7 in a neighboring soybean field. This really demonstrates the path of decline in richness, beauty, and resilience in our man-made ecosystems. The fourth principle is the establishment of a permanent plant root network, or keeping living roots as often and as long as possible in the soil. After all, what we've learned about the intimate relationship of plants and soil life, we can recognize now the importance of a constant flow of carbohydrates in the soil in order to feed and nourish all the bacteria and fungi living there. On the other hand, when we leave the fields fallow for long periods of times in the summer or winter, as is often common practice these days, soil life is forced on a fasting diet, and many of the microorganisms will die if they don't receive a constant source of food. The fifth principle concerns the integration of animals into our agricultural practices. The richest soils on Earth, the Great Plains in the US, the soils of the Masai Mara and the Serengeti in East Africa, the productive soils of Eastern Europe have been built over hundreds and thousands of years in a symbiotic relationship of grasses and animals. 50 million bisons have roamed the Great Plains, 40 million guanacos the South American pampa, and probably equal numbers of arroz bison, which was the European form of the American bison, and horses in Europe. The grasses needed the animals as much as the animals needed the grasses. And while being rejuvenated again and again by the animals, the grasses pumped massive amounts of carbon through their extensive and deeply developed root systems into the soil, both as dying root leftovers and as root exudates. So let's see that we can bring that natural pattern back into our agricultural system, profiting animals, plants, and soils. Okay, let's review these principles again. Let us always try to protect the soil surface, keep the soil covered. Let us minimize the mechanical disturbance of the soil. Let us plant, let us hold as many plants and animals in the highest diversity as possible. And let us ensure a permanent plant root network for the longest period of time in our soil. The last principle, let us integrate animals into our fields to mimic the million-year-old evolution of healthy, intact ecosystems. Thank you for watching this lesson.